Hello, and welcome to this tutorial for recording a webinar onto your PowerPoint presentation. Okay, in this walkthrough, I will be going over everything from creating your slides to recording narration, testing your audio, and finally how to save your finished webinar and where to do so. Okay, for the specifics, here's what this presentation will cover. Again, first I will be going over how to get started on your webinar, including the basic components and the life cycle of a webinar. We'll then go into a walkthrough on how to use PowerPoint to record narration over your slides. This will include technical aspects and tips for how to record so that it is not overwhelming and that you know what to expect when you go to record. We'll then look at how to test your audio and play it back, as well as how to adjust it. We'll look at the proper way to save and store your PowerPoint on the S drive. Lastly, we'll cover the next steps involved in the process, including converting that PowerPoint into a video file and how to upload the file onto YouTube so that your audience can view your webinar. First, let's go through all the basic components that will make up your webinar presentation. Before the presentation, you need to create a brief announcement document. I'll show you an example of one of these on the next slide. But essentially with this document, you just need to include a summary of your topic, what questions the presentation will answer, and registration details such as the date and time of your webinar. Next are the PowerPoint slides. This is the visual aspect of your presentation that you will go through on your webinar. Then you have your script. Your script, of course, is a Word document that you will use to read your audio narration from. You plan out what you want to say slide by slide to accompany your visuals. Next is your webinar recording, which is going into PowerPoint and recording your script. I will show you how to do this step by step, and it's really not that difficult, especially once you get the hang of it. Lastly, you will be able to save this presentation once it has sound accompanying it as a video file, which then premieres live on YouTube. Here's an example of the announcement document. You see that this author has a summary of their presentation at the top, then gets into what questions this presentation will cover, what the attendees will learn from the webinar, and then the specific details surrounding the webinar, including the date, time, and an about the presenter. This example will live in the tutorial folder under webinars in the S drive. Okay, before we get too far into the specifics of the presentation creation, here is the structure of the S drive and where to save your files as they are created. In the S drive, you want to head to the marketing folder, and then from there you go to the webinars folder. After that, within the webinars folder, you're going to look to the subfolder for the year of when you are presenting your webinar. So in this example, you see that this was a 2017 webinar. This author has all of her files saved in this folder named after her presentation's title within the 2017 webinars folder. And this folder that's named after her presentation's title, it includes her announcement, her PowerPoint, her script, audio, and video file. Again, all of this lives within her specific presentations folder, a subfolder of the 2017 webinars. So let's go through a couple slides as an example. Now this is an older example, but you can see how the author keeps the text on this slide limited so that she can go through each slide when she's talking at a casual pace so that her presentation holds the interest of her audience. Where possible, it's always a good idea to include some sort of image, picture, or diagram so that the audience doesn't lose interest if every slide is super text heavy. The author then builds out her script so that she knows what she wants to say during each slide. So you want to be comfortable enough with your presentation that you can read your script while your presentation plays. The simpler the slides are, the easier it is to then go ahead and create a script, which we will cover next. Okay, here is an example of a script. I am actually reading off of one right now, so as you hear this, it was also included in a Word document so that I know what I'm going to say as I go through this. This particular script that you see here is from the presentation that we just looked at. Again, you want it to sound like how you would speak when giving a presentation. Once you have all your slides built out and your script is ready to go, then it's time to start recording. Now, the first thing to get out of the way, I am creating this presentation on Microsoft Office 365, which is essentially the PowerPoint 2019 version. Those two versions of PowerPoint look mostly the same. If you are using an older version, like PowerPoint 2016, that's okay too. I will cover the steps on what to do if that is the case. For now, though, it's going to be mostly the same for everyone. The first step to recording your webinar is to open the PowerPoint presentation that you want to turn into a webinar. On this main editing screen, you want to go onto the navigation bar under Slideshow. Then you want to click the drop down that says Record Slideshow. It's up here. You can either choose to record from the current slide that you're on or record from the beginning. Now this is your recording screen in PowerPoint 2019 or Office 365, which is what I believe most of you should have. Again, I'll go over the steps on what to do if you have an older version of PowerPoint too, so don't worry if your screen doesn't quite look like this. But here, PowerPoint makes it very easy to record your narration for each slide. When this screen pops up, you are not recording right away, so you do not need to start talking until you are ready. Let's go over some of the controls that you see here. On the top left, you have your record button, your stop button, and your replay button. Once you hit record, the record button will turn into a pause button. And these become your three main controls: record/pause, stop, and replay. One quick note about the record button too. It will give you a countdown of 3, 2, 1 before PowerPoint actually records your narration. Now, the difference between pause and stop, you want to hit stop only when you are done recording your script for the entire slide. When you hit stop, it will stop recording for this slide and allow you to replay your narration by hitting that replay button next to the stop button. And if you like it, you can move on to the next slide. Alternatively, if you are on a roll with what you are saying and want to keep recording well into the next slide, just hit the arrow that you see here on the right of the slide, and that will allow you to keep recording and move on to the next slide without stopping. However, if you want to record it slide by slide, that's fine too. That's probably what I would recommend. You would just hit stop when you are done recording for that slide then, and again preview how the narration sounds by hitting the replay button next to the stop button. Now, let's say that you don't like how the narration sounded after hearing your replay. Then you can go to this clear drop down on the top right here. And it will give you two options. You can clear recordings on the current slide and clear all recordings. Most likely you probably just want to clear recording on your current slide, otherwise you will be completely starting from scratch. Okay, now that's the stop button. The pause button, that again only appears after you are recording, so that's why you don't see it on this preview. But you can use the pause button if you want to add more narration, but you need to take a break for whatever reason, maybe to check your script, or if you forgot what you wanted to say, whatever it may need be, but you don't want to finish recording on that slide just yet. Just hit pause and you can add more narration onto that slide, and PowerPoint will tack on from where you left off. Once you're finally done for that slide, then hit stop. And again, this right arrow moves you onto the next slide. You just continue this process until you have recorded narration for every slide in your presentation. And one last thing briefly about this view, I just want to go over everything on the bottom part of the screen here. Again, you'll mostly use those three controls on the top left, record, stop, and replay, as well as the arrow to move on to the next slide. But I just want to make sure that you are familiar with some of the control buttons on the bottom here. On the bottom left, it shows two timers here, both at 0 minutes, 0 seconds. But when you actually record your presentation, the first timer will be tracking for how long you're recording on this slide. The second timer will be tracking how long your total presentation has gone. Let's move over to the bottom right of the screen across all these colors for now. The microphone symbol on the bottom right here is to turn your microphone on and off. This camera icon next to it is to turn your computer's webcam on or off. And if the camera is on, the icon to the right of that is to turn a preview of your video on and off for you to see. Lastly, the two icons to the left of these colors are a pen and a highlighter. That's these two here. And they're for marking your presentation during your webinar. You can select the color and just mark as you record. You probably won't need to use it, but it was helpful in this particular case for this webinar tutorial. Or if you want to highlight a specific part of an image, a specific part of a diagram you may have in your webinar, then possibly you might find this useful. Okay, and that's the basics of this recording screen. Basically, again, you just repeat this process for every slide on your presentation. And again, you move on to the next slide by hitting the arrow right of the slide. Okay, now for those of you with older versions of PowerPoint, a couple of variations once you click either record current slide or record from beginning. The first thing you will notice is this box on the top left. Make sure both checkboxes are checked and then hit start recording. Unlike the newer version of PowerPoint, you will begin recording as soon as you hit start recording. You will see this player in the bottom right of this slide, but it'll be in the top left of your screen. Again, the pause button here has the same effect, and you pause if you want to say more, but you need to take a second to breathe. Otherwise, instead of the stop button in the newer version, you'll see an X in the top right of this recording box. You use that to stop. Or again, you can click the arrow to go on to the next slide and continue your narration. Again, you just continue this process until you have recorded narration for every slide in your presentation. Let's go ahead and look at some slides from example webinars and see how they have used recording to record their narration.
The biggest question is, why is this important? Why do we need to be aware of borderline issues? And for the manufacturer, the simplest answer to that question is time and money. When you choose the correct applicable regulation the first time, it will allow you to determine the regulatory path forward and appropriately classify the device the first time. Having to repeat this process, of course, can be time-consuming as well as expensive. What exactly are borderline products? Borderline products are those that may appear to fall under more than one regulation or directive, such as the MDD and the IVDD. Borderline products are also those that fall within the definition of a regulation or directive, but is otherwise excluded from the scope of the regulation or directive.
Okay, now you're ready to listen to your narration, now that you have audio on at least one of your slides. Whether you have recorded your entire presentation, or if it's just for one slide, here is how you can now preview and test your audio back on your editing screen. All slides that have narration will have this little sound object in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. That's regardless of what version of PowerPoint you have, it'll still look like this. You can only have one piece of narration per slide. So if you try to record two sounds, PowerPoint will just replace your first sound with the new one that you create. So once you have a piece of audio on a slide, do not record another piece of audio on that slide unless you want to get rid of it. Now, to test your recording audio, click the play button, and you should listen with headphones on for best results. If it sounds too quiet, consider recording again and talking slightly louder and clearer. Also, make sure you are recording in a room with as limited interference as you can from other noises. If it sounds too loud or there's feedback, try recording with headphones on like you are talking over the phone. And again, it's probably smart. My advice to you is to record one slide first, just to check your audio levels. Even if you want to record most of it in one take, it's probably better to record a small little piece, maybe it'd be for your title slide, something like that, just so you get an idea of where your audio is at. And then if you want to just record the entire presentation or a few slides, you can go ahead. I showed you how to do that. Okay, if you need to adjust your audio after you listen back to it, what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to right-click on the volume icon in the bottom right corner of your screen, and then click Sounds. On the Sound menu, choose the Recording tab at the top. Then highlight Microphone Array and click Properties. Then the Properties menu will come up, and from that you want to choose the Levels tab at the top. And for best results, move your microphone boost down to 0 so it doesn't pick up background noise. Of course, if you want it louder, then move it up for a larger boost. Okay, on older computers, to adjust your audio, it's basically the same steps, but I will walk you through these steps as well. First, you're going to want to right-click the volume icon in the bottom right and click Recording Devices. Select your microphone. You can either right-click it and then click Properties, or click it and click the Properties button towards the bottom of the screen. And for best results, on this menu, once again, you're going to go ahead and move your microphone boost down to 0. Lastly, once you're finished recording and you've listened back to your webinar and your audio sounds good, save the file on the S drive. Within the marketing folder, you want to go onto the webinar folder and save your presentation in there. If for whatever reason you are unable to access the S drive, you can then choose to upload the file on a hosting site such as WeTransfer, FileDropper, or Dropbox, and then send me a link at my email address there. Probably because it's going to be, the file will probably be too large for you to just email anyone directly. So probably have to go through a file hosting site like the ones I mentioned here. Once you're in the webinar folder under marketing, you then want to store your file in the folder that matches the current year. If you haven't already, create a subfolder within this year's folder that will contain all of your webinar files. Now, we looked at this earlier. This is an example from a webinar from 2017 that it has all the files for that given webinar. And this is where you would put your PowerPoint presentation. It should accompany your webinar announcement and all the other files that we can still create that are still yet to be created after this one. One of the files you will need, of course, is the video file itself. And no matter if you have PowerPoint 365, 2019, or 2016, you should be able to save yourself some trouble by saving your presentation as a video. And in order to do that, you're going to go in the top left navigation bar to File, and then down to Export. And after you hit Export, there you're going to want to scroll down to what should be the third option, which is Create a Video. Okay, after you hit that, you should see this menu on your left. You want to select either Full HD or HD from the first drop-down that you see there, and use Recorded Timings and Narration on the second drop-down. If you have any slides without narration, you can also set how many seconds you want that slide to appear during your video. It defaults at 5 seconds, which is about what you want, but if you feel like you need to adjust it, go ahead and do so under the second drop-down on the menu on your left. Then once you're all set with everything, hit Create Video, and this menu on your right will pop up. First, you want to select where you want to save the video. You can save it to your computer first and then save it to the S drive if you want, or you can also choose to save it directly onto the S drive. You can also choose to save it as an MP4 file or a WMV file. YouTube's compatible with the MP4 files, so it's best to just go ahead and save it as an MP4. Now, because your video file is likely pretty large, this video will probably take anywhere from about 5 minutes to maybe up to a half an hour, depending on how many slides you have, and possibly take even longer if you are saving it directly onto the S drive, or if there's shaky communication, shaky Wi-Fi while you're connected to the S drive. When you do save it to the S drive, make sure that you are saving it in the folder for your presentation, which should have all the rest of your files stored on it, like we looked at earlier. Okay, so now your MP4 file is in your S drive, along with your announcement, your script, and your PowerPoint. And the next step is to actually have your webinar on the web. The marketing team will work to set up a live stream of this video on YouTube, acting as a webinar stream for your presentation. Your webinar announcement will be used in promotion to alert the audience when the webinar will be premiering. And you see here a past example webinar, and look how well this one did. It has over 7,000 views. So that's the kind of exposure you can get from this webinar. As the webinar premieres or live streams on YouTube, our team will be able to answer questions in real time within the chat. The pre-recording aspect has another advantage in this way, so that our team can answer questions without disrupting the flow of the webinar. And you see an example of a past chat up on your screen now. Another feature that the marketing team will be able to provide you is stats and analytics on your webinar well after it is created and it premieres. Here you can see in 2019 alone the number of views, the watch time, and the subscribers that this webinar alone netted the GMED YouTube account. Again, all of this information will be available well after your webinar premieres. So yeah, your webinar lives on well after you stop recording. All right, this concludes the webinar presentation on webinars. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with your recording.